here in the chat. Xenon's here, Jeff's here, Pangolin's here, LDBR is here, get out of the freezer. Hi everyone, thanks for coming. If this is your first time, then this is an Aim High Live. So you can interact whenever you want, ask questions whenever you want, steer the way this will go. Today, I'm going to talk about, can trees talk to one another? But first we're going to talk about what's in that bowl. Anyway, yes, if this is your first time, then do get involved. If you're watching on Facebook, then that's fine, but you won't see most of the chat that's going on unless you go here. And if you're watching on YouTube as well, you get a bit of limitation, I think, as well. So do go ahead to see all the chat. Okay, I think quite a few people are on holiday, so I wonder how many people are gonna come to this one. We shall see. But I'm really excited about this one, so I'll maybe run it again. Anyway, so first question is this: what is in the bowl? Has anyone seen this before? Does this look familiar to anyone? And in case you haven't spotted it, I'm going to point out its eyes. So here. Well, actually, there are a few of them in this bowl. So here's the eyes of one of them. Here's one of the eyes of another of them. And here are the eyes of another one. I'm just going to remove those circles so that you can properly see the eyes. Anyway, what do you guys think they are? Someone's saying, some pangolin saying either a squid or some sort of weird fungus. And Jeff is saying, I dare someone to eat it. People do eat these. Get out of the freezer saying I haven't and I never want to see this again. Pangolin saying snails. Snails is quite close. It's not a snail. You need to think a lot bigger. This is a creature of the ocean, and it does live in a shell, which is why, in fairness, I don't know. I mean, this is the creature without the shell, but some people think that the animals that live in shells could easily just separate from the shell, but actually you see what kind of a mess it creates when you separate these animals from the shell. It's not a brain. This is a conch. Here it is inside its conch shell. So if you don't know what a conch is one of those like spirally shells that you can make holes in to do a little boop, 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 kind of trumpet sound. Anyway, yeah, this is the creature that lives inside a conch, and normally it just kind of hangs out the side with its eyes and its nose, and it's much cuter when it's in its shell, isn't it? Xenon's saying a conch is an animal. Yeah, so any shell that you see on the seafloor has been made by an animal that has lived in there. And they produce them from the minerals on the seafloor. It's normally like calcium carbonate. It's normally similar stuff to limestone, the rock that we find. Which is another reason why I was talking about this on another live, but birds and reptiles and things like that have to eat a certain amount of limestone, be it from grit that they find on the floor or something like that, so that they can make what? Why do birds and reptiles have to eat a certain amount of limestone? Grit. And obviously these guys have to eat a decent amount of it as well. Big old crustacean. Yeah, exactly. Eggs. So Vendible Sugar and Pangolin is saying eggs. Yummy limestone. Isn't limestone inedible? Well, no. It's really important for certain creatures to eat bits of limestone. It's just humans, we wouldn't eat limestone because we have no reason to. We don't need to make any eggs. Limestone is a crucial nutrient for many living things. Its chemical name is calcium carbonate, for those who want to know the chemistry. Calcium carbonate is limestone, and if you haven't seen these chemical symbols before, don't worry about it, you'll learn about them later on. Anyway, yes, so this creature, for those who missed it, because I can see that there are quite a few people who've joined late, this is a creature that lives inside a conch shell. In fact, I'm just going to grab this so we can keep the title over the top. Can trees talk to one another? But yeah, we were just, all you've missed if you've joined late is what's in this bowl, and the answer is a conch, little creature. But yeah, if you are joining late, then do ask questions whenever you want in the chat. And again, if you're watching on Facebook, I wouldn't do that. I'd watch on here because you get to see everything that people are saying. Right, okay, so today is about, can trees talk to one another? So firstly, let's just have a vote. I want you to all just type into the chat whether you think yes or no. Votes for yes, votes for no. Can trees talk to one another? Yes, 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 yes. Okay, there's loads of yeses. Someone called Finn has just said, oh my god, it's me. They're using shrimp in my name. Well, yeah, Finn, if you want to watch, if you want to see all the comments, then yeah, you got to go off Facebook. Got to go onto this site here, because this is where all the chat is. Okay, so people are saying yes through the roots. So basically everyone, 100% of people are voting yes, that trees can talk to one another, which is great. I remember like only 20 years ago, almost 100% of people would have voted no. And this is a really good example of how science progresses super fast sometimes. Zenon's saying, otherwise, why would you make this live stream? The answer is just the big words no. End of live stream. Right, okay, so here's one of my favorite trees. What kind of tree is this? Who knows what kind of tree this is? Oh, this is such a beautiful tree. These trees are now dying really quickly because of climate change. They're some of the most vulnerable to a rapidly changing climate. Jeff is asking, what's my favorite animal? Well, I always tell people that my favorite animal is an olm, but actually I really quite like pine martens. And I really like that they're reintroducing pine martens into the UK, which is great because pine martens are a predator that we've been missing, and it's kind of been a really big hole in the ecosystem. It's one of the reasons why all the red squirrels have disappeared. But pine martens are starting to eat all the grey squirrels, which is allowing the native red squirrels to make a comeback. So I'm a big fan of pine martens, but I always tell people olm because olms are funny. Anyway, yes, great answers. So Pangolin, Chef's Cooler are both saying baobab. It's a baobab tree. And so the baobab trees grow in southern Africa, and they're all starting to die en masse at the moment because the climate is changing so rapidly, and they're so bad at adapting to it quickly. These trees, some of them have stood for many hundreds of years, and now very rapidly loads of them are disappearing. Anyway, so what is a tree made of? What is a tree made of? What are trees made of? And I don't mean wood. I mean more like where, okay, people have said, everyone's saying wood and lignin. Okay, these things are right, but I mean, where does this come from? Like, where does the material that makes a tree come from? Okay, so LDBR is saying leaves, which is true. So the leaves are creating the material that will become the tree. But where does it all come from? So Get Out of the Freezer is saying the ground. Pangolin is saying the earth. Jeff is saying CO2. So most of the material that trees are made of comes from the air, as Jeff said. Most of it comes from the air. Yeah, so almost all of the material that makes up a tree comes from the air. It is mostly from CO2. And there's a bit of like there's a bit of a kind of gap, because some of the material does come from the water that comes up from the ground. But we think that the maximum possible percentage that might come from the air is about 95%. So 95% of trees is made from the air. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, so 95% of trees is made from air, approximately. Well, to be fair, though, it depends, because some of the oxygen and the water that comes up from the ground ends up being part of the tree, and it may make up more than 5% of the mass. But about 95% of the mass of a tree is made from air. Okay, so quick little go over of photosynthesis. So some of you will have done this in school, some of you won't. What is the equation for photosynthesis? So this is the process that trees do to make the matter that they're all made of, like to make the sugars that they turn into wood and so on. What is the equation for photosynthesis? Go. And don't worry if you haven't seen it yet. And Jeff is saying that makes sense, because if it was the ground, then the ground would sink. Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. But the ground doesn't sink. Instead, it just draws the carbon dioxide out of the air. Pangolin's saying, so are there lots of air spaces between the cells in the tree? No, not really. It's the air becomes the matter that makes up the tree, which is this photosynthesis. So Zenon's written it out perfectly, which is CO2 and water goes to O2 and glucose. Not add energy, so it takes energy. The tree will absorb the energy from the sun and use it to turn air, which is the CO2 that it gets out of the air, and the water that it gets from the ground, and it uses the sunlight to turn those into sugar, which it then uses to make itself, and oxygen. And so trees are constantly releasing oxygen, which is obviously why we can breathe. Anyway, don't read too much about this equation. The key points are you're taking air and water from the ground and you're using it to make sugars, which makes up the mass of the tree. Okay, cool. So now we can talk about, can trees talk to one another? Here is a little mini drawing of a forest. Now I'm just going to make another tree because there's not enough trees here. I want to make one more tree over here. Wait, get a better colour. I cannot see anything because it's so bright in here. Anyway, I'm going to make another tree here. Tree. Let's give it a nice green coating. Okay, so there's this amazing experiment that that was done not too long ago, where some people went to an old forest and they put a tree into a bag. Sean on Toast is so... Yeah, Sean, I've been doing a lot of interesting stuff. Sean, you're so late that you missed finding out what this creature is. Anyway, let's crack on. Countries talk to one another. So these experimenters went along to this old forest and they found a tree and they put it inside this big plastic bag. So they sealed the tree inside a plastic bag. And thanks for complimenting the tree art. So they sealed the tree inside this big plastic bag, and then into this plastic bag, they pumped a load of radioactive carbon dioxide. So slightly radioactive, so I'm going to give it a star, because that's often what you do when you're writing something that's radioactive. So they pumped a load of radioactive carbon dioxide inside the bag with the tree. Why do you think they did that? Now, while people are throwing in their ideas, I'm just going to catch up a bit on the chat because there's been loads of stuff that I've missed. Sean's saying it's a conch snail. Yeah, Sean, it is a conch. Nice. And Amy's saying this is how we can collect water from the trees in Australia if we get lost. Wait, tell us more about that, because I don't know what you mean by that. Okay, so Miz is saying maybe we give it radiation to give it superpowers. Jeff is saying to see if the other trees would react. Okay, cool. So let me show you what happens. So first they pump all this radioactive carbon dioxide into this bag with the tree. Now, this is not, I know that a lot of you will think of radiation as being a really dangerous thing, and obviously very high doses of radiation of certain kinds are really bad, and that's called ionizing radiation. However, these kind of really low doses of radiation aren't necessarily bad as long as living things are exposed to them in small amounts, and yeah, they're mainly used so that we can see where certain chemicals have gone. So the thing is, this carbon dioxide is radioactive, and that means we can continue to trace the carbon to see where it's gone. So we can trace the carbon bit to see where it's gone, because that's the radioactive bit of the carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide goes into this bag, and then the tree does photosynthesis. So going back to the process, the tree is going to combine this now radioactive carbon dioxide with water inside its leaves to make sugars. Now, someone asked earlier if the sugar then becomes wood. So sugar is one of the vital building blocks that will become things like wood inside the tree. So the radioactive carbon dioxide becomes radioactive sugars inside the tree. So the tree is now full of radioactive sugars that I will symbolize with these stars. And that means if you take a Geiger counter, and you guys have probably like seen these in the movies, which are like those kind of rods that you point in certain directions and they go and they kind of click depending on if something's radioactive. And when you swing them over something that's radioactive, they go and they click a lot more if something is giving off a radioactive signal. Anyway, if you've got one of those radioactive rods in the wood and you point it into nowhere, then you'll just get a few clicks every now and then because of random bits of background radiation. But when you point it at this tree down here, then you're going to get like a high signal, so you can tell that this tree is getting radioactive. But still, it's not bad for the tree. It's just so that we can label the tree and find out where the radioactive carbon has gone. Amy's hoping that someone's making a soundboard of all this. If someone makes a soundboard of me making clicks like a Geiger counter, can you send it to me? Because I will use it as my text message tone. Anyway, okay, so yes, radioactive carbon is now inside this tree. Now, the next thing they did was they went with their Geiger counters and they tested nearby trees. Now, which of these trees, tree 1, and let's take tree 2 and tree 3. Which of these three trees, 1, 2, and 3, so we're looking at this little one, and this bigger one here, which of these do you reckon was the most radioactive after leaving this tree in this radioactive bag for a week or so? So they left it in the bag for a week or so, and then they tested all these other trees. Which tree, 1, 2, or 3, do you reckon was the most radioactive? And for all those joining late, I just saw someone just joined this late. I think someone called Chloe. Chloe, hi. You're quite late, but it's fine. We are talking about can trees talk to one another, and we're talking about having put this tree in a bag with radioactive carbon dioxide, which has meant that the trees absorbed a bit of radiation, and now we're asking which of these trees, 1, 2, and 3, became the most radioactive as a consequence of this tree getting a bit more radioactive. What do you guys think? Okay, so Pangolin's saying maybe all the same, but everyone else is saying 1, and Pangolin's... and Sean is also complimenting my art. Thanks, Sean. My art is terrible. Anyway, the most radioactive tree by miles of 1, 2, and 3 would have been tree number 3. Now, the other highly radioactive trees in this forest would be this big tree here and this other big tree. It's the big trees that became radioactive rather than the small ones. The small ones became a bit more radioactive, but it was the big ones that became very radioactive. Why do you think this might be? Now, I'm just going to make up some numbers here to give you an idea of how radioactive these things might have been. So, and these are just made up numbers, they're not accurate to the experiment, but let's say that this tree was giving off 100 becquerels. So BQ is how you measure radioactivity. Then this little tree here might have been 2 becquerels, this little one might have been 1, this little one might have been 3, and this big one here might have been something like 15 becquerels. And this other big one here might have been something like 12 becquerels. But basically the big ones are far more radioactive. Why do you think that might have been? Okay, Jeff is saying maybe more space for radioactivity, and it's not about the space, it's more about the concentration. And Venerable Sugar saying they take in more CO2. Good point, but actually they have no exposure to this radioactive CO2. The radioactive CO2 is only trapped inside this bag, and only this big tree can absorb it. Okay, Lisa is saying they'll have a boost of glucose and increase their like biological activity, and that's kind of part of it. Yes. Amy's asking if it has something to do with allelopathy, which is not a biological word that I know, so I don't know, but maybe. And okay, Pangolin is saying maybe the big tree roots go deeper. And Japan Maple is saying secret underground networks that favour big trees, which is exactly right. Japan Maple is spot on. It's all about these underground networks that are favouring the big trees. So the thing that we recently discovered, which is completely amazing, is that these trees all have their root networks, of course. But let's take tree number 3 to make its root network as well. So they all have their root networks to draw in their minerals and their water and things that we learn about in school. But one of the things that we don't learn about in school, because it's such a new discovery and yet it's so important, is this. Is that beyond these networks of roots, there are more networks. And these networks are made from strings of, what do you guys think? What are these strings that are connecting together the roots? And they're not made by the trees, they're made by something else. What are they? So Amy is saying mushrooms, Japan Maple is saying fungi. These are exactly the right ideas. It's fungus. These things here are fungal networks, the same living things that make mushrooms. And these fungal strands go between the trees and they share nutrients between the trees. And so if this one builds up a load of radioactive sugar, then it will send some to its nearby friends along the fungal networks, essentially talking to them by sending them sending them these gifts of sugars, which they'll get other gifts in return for, and they send them to their friends. And the thing is that trees build these fungal networks incredibly slowly. And so which trees are going to have the strongest fungal networks? Which ones will have the biggest fungal networks attached to them? What do you think? And Sean on Toast is saying mycelium, and yes, mycelium is the name for these strands that connect together the trees. The thing about biology is that biology is full of loads of long, complicated words, and a lot of it is to do with memorizing long words in order to do well in exams. But when I teach bits of biology, I like to just share the stuff that I think is cool, and I try really hard to avoid the long words because they're so long and I feel like they alienate people. And eventually you do have to learn the long words, but for now I'm basically just going to call these fungal networks. Okay, so LDBR is saying the oldest and essentially the biggest, and Ronnie Rultz Calderon is saying the same. Ronnie, by the way, if you're watching on Facebook, then you'll miss almost all the comments, so join on this website if you want to see what everyone else is saying. Same with you, Chelsea. And Sean is saying, had to Google how to spell it as dyslexia as bully. Okay, yes. So it's the oldest and biggest trees that will have the strongest fungal networks, and so they're the ones that properly share with one another. And this is why when you wander into a forest, you can always feel if it's a healthy forest, and there's something very intuitive about human beings being able to feel if a forest has like a healthy fungal network. It's something to do with the way that you breathe it in and you can taste it. Some forests just taste old and they taste properly alive, and it's because they have healthy fungal networks underneath them. This is why we can't just try and plant up new forests without carefully thinking about what trees go in there, because if you just create a plantation of all the same kind of tree, they'll have really crap fungal networks, and if they've got bad fungal networks, then the forest is never going to become that healthy. Anyway, right, here's a kind of picture of a tree with its roots going underground, and then you can see these like white webs coming off it are these fungal networks that start to join the bits of root systems together, and will also join these roots to other trees further away, like this tree in Africa. This is often called the wood wide web, because it's basically like this incredible interconnectivity between all the trees. That humans have obviously only recently developed the idea of the World Wide Web and the internet to connect us all together, but trees have had this for many millions of years, being able to communicate with one another. So what kind of communications do you think they do? So we know that they pass sugars down these fungal networks, so they're passing like these radioactive bits of carbon, if it's got radioactive carbon in it. What else do you reckon the trees will exchange? What other kind of information? So they'll exchange food, and what else do you reckon? Japan Maple is saying, I love the smell of a good forest. Yeah, there's a great word for the smell of rain when it's just fallen, especially in an old forest, and it's petrichor, which is, yeah, the smell of the ground after it's just rained, but it's especially rich in an old forest. So Get Out of the Freezer saying gossip. Jeff's saying gossip as well. And Lisa's saying pH. Amy's saying there is a trade of phosphorus, which is exactly right. Okay, so they're trading food, they're trading essential nutrients, so things that they may have gotten out of the ground that one may be better at extracting than another. They not only trade these things, they will also trade distress signals. Why would it be useful for them to trade distress signals? Why might that help? What do you guys reckon? Why would they trade distress signals? And obviously they'll be trading shiny Pokemon cards. And Dorian Hyde is saying petrichor. Are you correcting my spelling? I'm so bad at spelling. You may well have done. Oh no, that is how I spelt it. Okay, so Dorian is saying maybe for a defense mechanism. Japan Maple is saying maybe to prepare for something, or Chloe saying maybe to warn other trees. Exactly. Okay, so and who's saying donating? Jeff is saying about donating food. Brilliant. This is so good. Yeah. So they will trade distress signals with one another so that the others can send them extra food and nutrients, but also so that the others can prepare for a similar threat. So say that they are. Obviously, this one's like a really sad one that they can't do anything about because they're trees and they don't have any way to defend themselves. But if they're being chopped down, then they will send distress signals to those trees further down the line, which will ultimately be trying to prepare for being destroyed, but just can't prepare anywhere near fast enough because humans move so much faster than trees. You know, when trees get really distressed and they know they're going to die, you can tell that a tree thinks it's going to die because it will produce a ridiculous amount of blossom and fruit one year because it'll be having one last big effort to reproduce itself. Anyway, yeah, they'll trade distress signals. Maybe it'll be something like a parasite that's invading and then other trees might be able to prepare better. But anyway, but a key idea of this is that what kind of... If these are the things, if these are the bits of information that the trees are all going to share with one another, what kind of trees do you want inside the forest? What's the best way to build a forest community? What kind of trees would you want to put inside that forest? What do you reckon? So Japan Maple is saying old ones. And yeah, exactly. So old trees is good because the older trees are going to be better at communicating with one another. But you can't really... I'm thinking if you're going to plant up a new forest... But exactly, this is one of the key reasons why we have to protect our old forests, because they are so much more developed than, you know, like a lot of governments that have really not got on top of the science yet because they just haven't heard it. You know, this is news to a huge number of people in the world. But a lot of governments think, oh, we've grown the forest and the trees are the same size as they were before, so therefore we've regenerated the forest. And it's total rubbish. It's not about the size of trees, it's about the development of these networks, because these networks also have this incredible ability to store more carbon in the soil, and not just that, but to create healthier ecosystems that can allow a lot more life to survive there, and therefore a huge amount more carbon to be locked up in the ecosystem itself. So old forests are so much more valuable than new forests. We really, really need to protect our old forests. But yeah, trees with long lifespans is important, but the way it seems, and LDBR are saying a mix. So this is the key idea, is that in order to plant up a healthy forest, you need a really, really good mix of trees because you want a proper community. You want a community where there are different trees with different strengths, so that certain trees can help out other trees in times of need, because there's always a tree that is going to be better at something than other trees that can then help out the other trees. And these trees really do talk to one another, and they really do help one another out, which is completely mind-blowing, I think. Anyway, here is just a stump that someone's chopped down, but you know, stumps don't have any leaves, and yet they have quite a lot of stored energy, and so they're able to keep trying to regenerate themselves. But the thing is that they're also being supported by other trees nearby with their fungal networks, and fungal networks are able to keep tree stumps alive for many decades. Some tree stumps have been shown to stay alive for ridiculous numbers of decades, just going on and on because the other trees just won't let go, and they just keep feeding nutrients to them. Anyway, there is one tree in the fungal networks that we know of called a black walnut. What do you guys think a black walnut might do? Black walnut plays a bit of a different role in a community of trees. Black walnut. What do you guys reckon a black walnut does? Anyway, while you're answering, I'm just gonna check out the chat. So, Digmeister is saying that he has a ginkgo tree in his backyard. That's a living fossil. So yeah, these ginkgo trees are Ginkgo biloba are the ones that have leaves that have a completely different. Most leaves have this kind of skeleton structure where they all like build out from the middle. But there's this tree called Ginkgo biloba which doesn't have that central skeleton and then the bits coming off. Instead, it looks like more like a fan, and it's a living fossil because most leaves like that have died out, but ginkgo trees leaves still remain. They're a beautiful yellow color. Anyway, Pangolin is saying it's kind of like human society, and that the different elements of the society try and support one another, and that diversity is absolutely key. And Ansel Tan's saying that his peanuts are discussing things, which, yeah, sure they are. And, ooh. The way it seems is asking, do the other trees that are connected know that the tree they're feeding is a stump? So again, we don't really know that, and yeah, it's very, very possible that they won't have any signal that will show that it's a stump, and so they may just keep feeding it involuntarily. Okay, so Johann Mabel saying that the black walnut may do sabotage, and the pangolin saying it sounds sinister. It is sinister. The black walnut, if it gets inside a fungal network, will feed poisons down the fungal network so that it poisons nearby trees so that it can steal their nutrients. And it's the only tree we know of so far that does that, but the black walnut is not a good egg to have on the old fungal network. Anyway, thanks so much for coming, everyone. This has been great. This is what's coming up for the rest of the week, or until Thursday at least. So yeah, tomorrow Nish is going to do a philosophy one on Are Robots People, and also tomorrow we've got the first one with a guest, and it's the amazing Rob Hopkins, who is an environmentalist and a writer, and he has done incredible things with setting up towns that are able to grow food for themselves far more sustainably, and he's completely transformed parts of England in doing this. Anyway, he's going to talk tomorrow about imagination and building a better future, so come and join me tomorrow to talk to him. And Hannah Bolland, who is new, she's an amazing doctor from Oxford, and she's going to talk about what is cancer tomorrow. And then we've got What Does Freedom Taste Like from Nish on Wednesday, Is James and the Giant Peach Propaganda from Phil, and then on Thursday I'm going to do What's the Science of Deja Vu? What's the Science of Deja Vu? It's going to be great. So please do come along to those. And yeah, if you haven't already, do follow our socials, which are all Aim High Live. And please do share with your friends. And also, please go to the website as well, which is here. And if you haven't already, then do join the mailing list so that we can send you the calendar each week. And there's also, if you're on the website and you haven't done it already, although I know most of you have, there is a feedback form that you can fill out directly underneath the stream. And that is so helpful for us to improve this. And also, finally, sorry, so many things. If you want to suggest any lesson titles to us or topics you want us to cover, then go on our socials and message us on there, because that's how we take the suggestions. Anyway, thanks so much for coming. Do join tomorrow and have a good rest of your bank holiday if you are on a bank holiday. Ciao.